Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP Vlog on Podcast. So we do this vlog on podcast every Sunday at 8 a.m. London time. Today it might be slightly different because what's happened is we've had a clock change in the UK. We've gone into what's called daylight or summertime daylight saving, and so some of you may notice that we sort of were slightly offset by 1 hour, but in fact it is just a clock change in the UK. So let me jump straight into it. So what we like to do is we like to do a summary of the news from Zimmer and Peacock for this week. We did put an article out last Sunday after the original vlog, and the article is really around testing of natural products. So testing of natural products is quite complicated because these products are quite heterogeneous. If you have a chili, then the capsaicin is hotter in different parts of the chili. It could be the same for black peppers, the same for garlics, etc. That when you're trying to test analytes in natural products, the products themselves are quite variable, and so giving a kind of accurate answer is quite tricky. You can have local hotspots of molecules and other points within the sample which are actually quite dilute in terms of the analyte of interest. Anyway, we put a note out there this week about HPLC testing of natural products, and also then we contrasted it with our work on food sense. And it's quite nice because when it comes to capsaicin, we've obviously done our own internal validation against HPLC, high pressure liquid chromatography, but then we've also had a verification done for us. We didn't realize they were going to do it, but there was a university in the US. They bought their own food sense, and they essentially did their own report, very professionally done. And there's a guy there called Charlie Rower, so we're appreciative of Charlie for doing his work on verifying the food sense by using HPLC methods. In his own work, Charlie, and I've spoken to Charlie, and he does say himself, actually the problem with HPLC was we could only afford to test each sample once, where of course when he was doing his food sense work, he was actually testing it 3 times, triplicate. So he was essentially more certain in his food sense results than he was necessarily in his HPLC results. So I think, Charlie's assessment of food sense is it was essentially more rapid. That is definitely an advantage. He didn't have to send it off to the HPLC. He actually could afford to do multiple tests. And of course, HPLC is just intrinsically expensive. It's not really an option for most or many companies. So I think Charlie was very appreciative of our technology. So that was a nice paper. And it's just to reflect that we did put a note out there this week about the testing of natural products. Some other news from Zimmer and Peacock this week. We do like to sort of put out really technical, sometimes commercial, but information that's kind of relevant to the community. Something that we did this week and was very relevant, I feel, was we put out a video about quality management systems. So at ZP, we'll talk a lot about science, a lot about engineering, a lot around the technologies of science and engineering. But we then, our quality manager actually has put together a really nice video about QMS. I mean, this was, it wasn't a quick video. What I mean by that is, there's a definite, quality even in the video itself, which is a reflection really of our quality management system at ZP. So we are appreciative of our quality manager putting together such a quality video. And so if you're interested in what is ISO 13485, what is QMS or quality management systems, I think essentially don't hesitate to contact us at ZP, and appreciate the video coming from our quality manager there. Something else that we put out this week at 8 a.m. London time every Thursday, we do a technical webinar. We try to answer questions that have come in from people during the week. This week we'd had one about LSV, linear sweep voltammetry, and how to do a TAFL plot from it. We'd had one on detecting heavy metals. We'd had one on fabricating an immunosensor on a carbon electrode. And we'd had one really about microfluidics, and we were kind of saying, look, with microfluidics, it can be, sometimes people design something that's just inherently complex, and so we need to be essentially shrunk and simplified. And then we also did one on cortisol sensors. So every week, I think we haven't missed any weeks in the last 2 years. We do as I say, a webinar on for the members of our ZP Technical Zone, and we do discuss their questions that have come in for that week. Something else that's happening as well is we are having a workshop in May. I'm just going to check the dates myself, but we do a workshop, at least 2 workshops a month, one in the UK and one in Norway. So we do have a workshop in the UK, in May, but we also do have one in Norway in May as well. So we have one on the 3rd and 4th of May. I mean, these are super useful because I just know we haven't had anyone come to this workshop and not think, no, actually this was worth it, because we do put a lot of effort. The quality of the presentations is good. Everyone goes into the lab and does their own work. I remember our last one of our last attendees, she was in the lab doing her own lab tests, getting some good results. So we're super happy with the workshops that we get. And we'll definitely obviously carry on doing them. We also, all the time at ZP, we're busy in our facilities making biosensors. Biosensors is something we essentially live and breathe. And so we did get some, I updated some of the results that we actually had on our calcium sensors of recent. So we did test some calcium sensors at 0.110 and 0.11 and 10. Our calcium sensors, and it's kind of interesting to see because you see the signal is approximately doubling, and this is really a reflection of the logarithmic relationship that most ion selective electrodes have, that you go from let's say 0.1 to 1, and you then go from 1 to 10, and the signal essentially only doubles because it's showing a logarithmic relationship. So we're super happy with our calcium sensors this week as well. Something else that we've put out as well is that at ZP, we are unusual that actually we have this kind of, if we were to try and summarize ourselves in sort of one phrase, it would be sensor to API. And what sensor to API really means is, look, we're really good at sensors and we're really good at putting sensors into applications. But that sensor, it does require electronics. It does require connectivity often to the cloud. In that cloud, we're often doing the interpretation of that data into information. And then we do run an API policy, an application program interface policy, so that other people can actually get at that data by making what's called an API call upon us. And so we describe ourselves as sensor to API. And so we do have some notes we put up online about what sensor to API actually means to us, but it's really a summary of our entire technology stack. And then something else that we put together this week was we have recently been stepping up. We've always been really good at the electronics for biosensors, but we haven't had so many R&D instruments sort of for the R&D community. So we just put some sort of very engineering photographs up of parallel potentiostats, and just highlighted that at ZP we are developing and manufacturing parallel potentiostats. Some of these are used in people's equipment, and some of these are actually then going to R&D equipment so that people can do the work in the lab. But we just wanted to kind of essentially highlight that. So I mean, I think everything that you hear from a ZP this week does fit into that sort of sensors to API comment that I made earlier on. So the rapid testing of natural products, when we do the rapid testing of natural products, we test those products, but actually that data does end up in the cloud. When we're talking about the QMS system, I say that we have a uniqueness, which is, sensors to API. But when I wrote that note, we also put the word manufacturing in there, because one of the biggest problems in the sensor space is actually manufacturing. It's the repeatability of manufacturing. So and the only way you can really get good at something and repeatable is probably to follow a quality system. So it does fall into this whole, sensors to API philosophy. The ZP Developer Zone is really something that we think, all companies should give, something back. In modern business, modern business is really a conversation. So people can ask questions, we answer them, and it's built, it's having that kind of relationship. So we're happy to do our ZP Developer Zone every week. And I think really what came out of the ZP Developer Zone is, we do obviously give free information, but we do find that, especially, people in commercial entities, they really want to, something a bit deeper. And so from the ZP Developer Zone has blossomed the ZP Workshop. So there is a workshop, as I say, in May. And then this whole sensors to API, we'll do sensors which are, testing chili, for example, but we have things like calcium sensors, these ion selective electrodes. And then sometimes it's not enough to measure one analyte at a time. Sometimes you have to measure several things, glucose and cholesterol and lactate and pH, etc. So then we do have this parallel potentiostat capability. And also in an R&D setting, you just can't get enough data to make statistical assessments of sensors or of new assays. So at ZP, we think it is important to get, a lot of data in order to make a sensible decision around that data. What does that data really mean? Because when you just collect one data point, obviously, the data point itself for some reason can have an error in it, and you're making the wrong conclusion. So at ZP, we do try to make sure that we do everything in parallel. So what I will do now is I will say, I'll wrap up the vlog and the podcast for this week. ZP will, of course, do its ZP Developer Zone on Thursday at 8 a.m. London time. Like I said, there's been a slight clock change by 1 hour in the UK, so that's why some of you may find this coming out at a slightly different time, but just the clock change. So if you want to catch up with ZP, don't forget our ZP Developer Zone webinar on Thursday at 8 a.m. London time. Okay, thanks very much and have a good week.